"Excuse me," Rebecca said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You clearly don't belong in first class." Sarah looked up from her book, confused. "I'm sorry, what?" "You heard me," Rebecca replied coldly. "This section is for paying customers, not charity cases." Before Sarah could react, before anyone could stop her, Rebecca tilted the coffee pot and poured the steaming hot liquid directly onto Sarah's lap. "Oops," Flight Attendant Rebecca Miller said, with a cold smirk, not even pretending it was an accident. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before sneaking into first class where you don't belong." But what Rebecca didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she is messing with the wife of the airline owner. Before we dive into this unbelievable story of karma and consequences, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you love stories of justice being served, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. When this plane lands, Flight 447 to JFK was boarding, and the first-class cabin was filling up with the usual crowd: business executives, wealthy travelers, and frequent flyers. Among them sat Sarah Williams, 28 years old, in seat 2A. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, not exactly what Rebecca considered first-class attire. Her purse was modest, her wedding ring was simple, and she looked like any other young woman trying to enjoy a quiet flight with her book. And that's exactly what caught Rebecca's attention. Rebecca Miller had been a flight attendant for Elite Airways for 7 years. She prided herself on maintaining what she called standards in first class. In her mind, first class was reserved for important people, wealthy people, people who belonged there. And this woman reading her paperback novel, she definitely didn't belong. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Rebecca watched Sarah settle into her seat. Sarah pulled out a well-worn romance novel and began reading quietly, occasionally sipping the complimentary champagne. She wasn't bothering anyone, wasn't making noise, wasn't causing any problems whatsoever. Other passengers were busy with their laptops, phone calls, and business documents. The cabin was peaceful, but Rebecca saw an opportunity. For no reason other than pure hatred, Rebecca had decided she didn't like this woman. Maybe it was jealousy. Maybe it was resentment toward people she perceived as getting above their station. Or maybe Rebecca was just having a bad day and needed someone to take it out on. Whatever the reason, Sarah Williams was about to become her target. "Excuse me," Rebecca said, approaching Sarah's seat with a fake smile plastered across her face. "Is there a problem here?" Sarah looked up from her book, confused. "A problem? No, everything's fine. Why?" Rebecca's eyes narrowed with pure disdain. Everything about this woman annoyed her. Her casual clothes, her modest appearance, her obvious comfort in first class. "Ma'am," Rebecca said, her voice dripping with condescension, "you clearly don't belong in first class." Sarah blinked in confusion. "Excuse me, what do you mean I don't belong here?" "I mean," Rebecca replied with a shrug, "this section is for business travelers and important passengers, not people like you." Sarah's face flushed with disbelief. "People like me? What's that supposed to mean?" But Rebecca wasn't interested in being subtle. She was interested in making this woman's life miserable. "Ma'am," Rebecca said, her voice now loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass." Sarah looked at her with complete bewilderment. "My boarding pass? Why? Is there something wrong with my seat? Just show me your boarding pass, now." Sarah reached into her purse and produced her boarding pass. Rebecca snatched it from her hand and examined it closely, as if she were looking for some kind of forgery. "Seat 2A, first class," Rebecca read aloud, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Well, isn't that interesting? What's interesting about it? It's my assigned seat." Rebecca let out a theatrical laugh. "Right. You just happen to belong in first class. How convenient." The surrounding passengers were now fully invested in this uncomfortable spectacle. Sarah could feel their eyes burning into her, judging her, wondering what she had done to deserve this treatment. "Look," Sarah said quietly, trying not to cause more of a scene. "I don't understand what the problem is. I have my ticket, I have my seat assignment, and I haven't done anything wrong. The problem," Rebecca interrupted, raising her voice even more, "is that you don't belong here. This is first class, not a budget airline." Sarah's mouth dropped open. "Are you seriously discriminating against me because of how I'm dressed? Or do you just detest black people?" "I'm not discriminating against anyone," Rebecca sneered. I'm just maintaining standards. Sarah closed her book, her patience finally wearing thin. Standards? What standards exactly am I violating by sitting quietly and reading? But Rebecca wasn't interested in logic or fairness. She was interested in asserting her power and making this woman suffer for no reason other than her own twisted satisfaction. You know what? Rebecca said, grabbing the coffee pot from her service cart. I think it's time you learned your place. Before Sarah could react, before anyone could stop her, Rebecca tilted the coffee pot and poured the steaming hot liquid directly onto Sarah's lap. Sarah screamed. The coffee soaked through her jeans, burning her skin and staining her sweater. The liquid splattered onto the seat, the floor, and her book. And then, the most shocking part of all, several passengers actually started laughing. Finally, someone put her in her place. One white man chuckled. That's what happens when you try to sit where you don't belong, a woman whispered loudly to her companion. Sarah sat there, dripping with coffee, surrounded by people who saw her pain as entertainment. She had never felt so humiliated, so small, so utterly powerless in her entire life. Rebecca stood over her with a satisfied smirk, believing she had just delivered some twisted form of justice. Maybe now you'll think twice before pretending you belong in first class, she said coldly. Some of us actually earned our seats. Sarah looked up at Rebecca through tears of humiliation and rage. For a moment, she seemed like she was about to say something important, but then she took a deep breath and reached for her phone. I need to make a call, she said quietly. Rebecca laughed cruelly. Let me guess, you're calling to complain? Good luck with that, sweetheart. No one's going to believe someone like you over a 7-year employee. But Sarah wasn't calling to complain to customer service. She dialed a number she knew by heart, a number she called every day, a number that would change everything about this flight. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, a familiar voice answered. Hey, sweetheart, the voice said warmly. How's the flight going? Did you get settled okay in first class? Sarah's voice cracked as she responded. David, something's happened. I need you to do something for me. Rebecca Miller, who had been walking away, suddenly stopped. There was something in Sarah's tone, something in the way she said that name, that made her blood run cold. David? Why did that name sound so familiar? What happened? The voice on the phone asked, suddenly concerned. Sarah, you sound upset. A flight attendant just poured coffee on me in front of the entire first-class cabin. She humiliated me, called me names, said I don't belong here, and Sarah's voice broke again. And some of the passengers were laughing, David. They were actually laughing. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, the voice spoke again, but this time it was different, colder, more serious than Sarah had ever heard it. What's the flight number? Elite Airways, Flight 447, LAX to JFK. Another pause, longer this time. Sarah, I want you to stay exactly where you are. Don't move. Don't let anyone intimidate you. I'm making some phone calls right now. Rebecca felt a chill run down her spine. Something about this conversation was making her very, very nervous. Sarah, the voice continued, and this time, Rebecca Miller could hear it clearly through the phone. I want you to ask that flight attendant what her name is. Can you do that for me? Sarah looked up at Rebecca, who was now standing frozen in the aisle, her face pale with growing realization. What's your name? Sarah asked, her voice steadier now. What does it matter? Rebecca stammered. What's your name? Sarah repeated, holding the phone closer. Rebecca Miller, she whispered. Sarah repeated the name into the phone. There was another pause, and then, Rebecca Miller is about to have a very bad day, the voice said. Sarah, I love you. This will all be over soon. The line went dead. Rebecca Miller stood there, her mind racing. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The confidence she had felt moments earlier was rapidly evaporating, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Who was that? She asked weakly. Sarah looked up at her, and for the first time since the coffee incident, she smiled. That, Sarah said calmly, was my husband. Your husband? So what? He's going to come rescue you? Rebecca tried to laugh, but it came out forced and hollow. In a way, Sarah replied. You see, Rebecca, my husband David is a very understanding man, but there's one thing he can't stand. One thing that makes him absolutely furious. Rebecca waited, her palms beginning to sweat. He can't stand it when people hurt his family. Just then, The captain's voice came over the intercom, but this time it wasn't the usual pre-flight announcement. This was something different. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a special announcement to make before takeoff. I'd like to welcome aboard Mrs. Sarah Williams, the wife of our company president and CEO, Mr. David Williams. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. The passengers who had been laughing moments earlier suddenly looked sick to their stomachs. Rebecca Miller felt like she was going to faint. The captain continued, "Mrs. Williams, on behalf of Elite Airways and your husband, I want to personally apologize for any inconvenience you may have experienced during boarding. The flight attendant responsible for the incident will be dealt with immediately upon landing." Rebecca's career, her livelihood, her entire future flashed before her eyes in an instant. The woman she had humiliated, the woman she had poured coffee on, the woman she had called names and treated like garbage was married to the man who owned the entire airline. Sarah stood up slowly, coffee still staining her clothes. She looked around at the passengers who had laughed at her humiliation, and then at Rebecca, who was now trembling with the realization of what she had done. "You know," Sarah said quietly, "you were right about one thing, Rebecca. This flight is going to be a lesson. You humiliated me for absolutely no reason other than your own cruelty. You judged me, attacked me, and made a spectacle of my pain. And now you're going to learn what it feels like to lose everything because of your own prejudice." The plane began to taxi toward the runway, but Rebecca Miller's journey was already over. But the story wasn't finished yet. As the plane touched down in New York 5 hours later, Rebecca noticed something unusual. Instead of the typical ground crew, there were several official-looking individuals waiting at the gate: security officers, airline executives, and were those police officers? Sarah gathered her belongings, now changed into a fresh outfit the captain had personally provided. As she prepared to disembark, she turned to Rebecca one final time. "Rebecca," she said calmly, "I want you to know that I don't take pleasure in what's about to happen to you. But actions have consequences, and treating people with cruelty, especially when they've done nothing wrong, comes with a price." The moment Rebecca stepped off the plane, the authorities were waiting. "Rebecca Miller?" one of the officers asked. "Yes," she replied weakly. "You're under arrest for assault and creating a public disturbance. You have the right to remain silent." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Rebecca watched Sarah walking away with her husband David Williams, a man she now realized she'd seen in company newsletters and corporate videos dozens of times. Sarah was smiling, completely recovered from the earlier trauma. Rebecca Miller's career was over, her reputation was destroyed, and all because she chose to be cruel to a woman who had done absolutely nothing to deserve it. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes it owns the whole building. If you enjoyed this story of instant karma and justice being served, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories. And don't forget to tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what would you have done in Sarah's situation?